results. All eyes are on the presidential election. One of the key swing states is right here in the state of Michigan, and your vote in Greater West Bloomfield could have a major impact on the outcome of our state's 15 electoral votes. Joining us for more insight on how your vote may ultimately impact the decision of the presidency at the end of the day or end of this process is Dave Dulio, Distinguished Professor of Political Science at Oakland University and also the Director of their Center for Civic Engagement. Dave, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, and perfect time to have you on to talk about this election because we've heard for weeks, we've heard for months, we've heard for the last 4 years that Michigan's going to be a key state in the 2024 election. But diving deeper into that, getting more into the nitty-gritty of why that's the case, one of the big factors in that is Oakland County. And so as much as we go into every election telling everybody that their vote really matters, that every single one of their votes matters, how much do individual voters in Greater West Bloomfield today in this election, how much can they be assured that their vote is not only one that matters, but could be critical in deciding our next president?
Sure. I think Oakland County can tell the story of this election in terms of how Michigan goes and how our 15 electoral votes are allocated. And I say that because, number one, Oakland County's got a huge number of votes, right? But it's also been changing and shifting over the last 20 years or so. But if we just take the last couple of presidential elections, you can see how big of an impact it has. Where in 2016, Donald Trump lost Oakland County, but by only 50,000 votes. In 2020, he loses Oakland County by more than double that, 108,000 votes. And then in 2022, Gretchen Whitmer carries Oakland County by 145,000 votes, right? So we see this pretty big shift toward Democratic candidates at the top of the ticket over the last 3 cycles. And I think that that's, something to look at tonight. And we'll be able to watch it as returns come in. You can watch it on the Oakland County website. You can see how different areas are voting. So, I would tell your viewers and listeners to look at Oakland County and see if Trump can hold down those losses, and if, alternatively, if Harris can run up the score.
And those votes, those results will come in, the unofficial results from Oakland County throughout the night. We have a link to that at the very top of our homepage as we speak on civiccentertv.com. The polls close at 8 o'clock tonight. As long as you're in line by 8 o'clock, your voice will be able to be heard through your vote, and those election results will cycle in. Now, in the state of Michigan, much like many other states, Dave, early voting playing a huge role in these elections. The Detroit Free Press reporting that 1.2 million people have already voted in the state of Michigan, 153,000, almost 154,000 of those right here in Oakland County. How might that impact when we know some of those results that we'll see from Michigan, and if we know the results of the 15 electoral votes today?
Yeah, I think a big change from the last presidential election is that communities in Michigan are able to start to process absentee ballots 8 days before Election Day. So the vast majority of places in Michigan have started to open those envelopes, do the signature verification, and start to get them through that process. I think that will speed things up. But, who knows when we'll have final results and know, say, how our 15 electoral votes are allocated. And I think that it really just depends on how close it is. The polls, as you've seen, say that it's razor thin, and I have no reason not to believe that. But, polls have been wrong before. So if it does happen to be more of a margin, I think we'll know earlier, right? But if it's as close as everybody seems to think it is, it'll probably take a couple of days.
And we know that in Oakland County, a lot of these local races, we do tend to see those results come in a lot quicker than we'd see for something that's decided at the statewide level, like the state's senator for the U.S. Senate, or, of course, the presidential electoral votes result. That may be coming on later on, but how much then, as we look at those local political races, those partisan races in greater West Bloomfield and then spread throughout Oakland County, how might that sort of be a bellwether for what we see down the road as those presidential election results come in?
Yeah, you know, I think it could certainly start to tell the tale, right? I mean, I think if we look at margins from past races, if we look at, say, you know, a state house district in Rochester Hills, you know, I think, and there's a competitive one there, right? Does that tell us anything? It could, if one of the two candidates pulls it out, right? For instance, if and the one I'm thinking of is State Representative Mark Tisdall. You know, if he manages to win that by, say, more than he did last time, well, that's a really good sign for Trump. Now, if it becomes a nail biter and his opponent gives him more of a scare than anticipated, well, that's probably a good sign for Harris. So I think that you know, there are some things we can read the tea leaves on, but at the end of the day, you know, it's really hard to project other outcomes from one or two local races.
Some of those others to keep an eye on in our local area that could maybe show big swings. You'd think about the State House's 20th district between Noah Arbit, the incumbent Democrat, and Brendan Cowley. That would be quite a big surprise considering how the local community has gone in recent elections, and especially the U.S. House of Representatives race in the 11th district with Haley Stevens and West Bloomfield's Nick Somberg. Now, if those big swings were to happen, that would be quite jarring, and that would tell a lot of the story. But from what you're saying, these races sort of down the ballot higher up, those state senators, those U.S. senators, the U.S. representatives, probably not going to play that big of a role unless there's a major swing.
You know, those are two great examples because, you know, the outcome there, I mean, Noah Arbit's going to win. Haley Stevens is going to win. But the margins can tell us a difference, right? And we might be able to see some shifts in voter turnout in certain areas that might give us a clue as to how things are playing across Michigan. And it's kind of fun to try to figure it out that way, right? I mean, so I imagine some of your viewers and listeners are going to spend the night refreshing those screens at oakgov.com and see if they can't read those tea leaves themselves.
That's going to be my night also. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on that. I know your team also will over at Oakland University and the Center for Civic Engagement. Dave Dulio is with us on the show today from Oakland University, a professor of political science and the director of their Center for Civic Engagement. And Dave, I want to get your perspective on this because we always hear so much about the presidential election, or we've heard, especially in the ads, about the U.S. Senator race between Mike Rogers and Alyssa Slotkin, but those local election races are really so important. And so as you're teaching your students about how political science ultimately plays out not only nationally, statewide, regionally, but in these local communities, what really is that importance of those down ballot positions that are those local city council members, those parks and recreation commissioners, and how those ultimately impact local communities and future elections?
Yeah, it's a great point. And we obviously, and for good reason, spend a lot of time talking about the race for the presidency or for a U.S. Senate or U.S. House, right? But it's really those local levels where citizens and residents are going to come in contact with government more often and on issues that are really close to home, right? I mean, let's give you an example, right? School board, right? The school board is going to make decisions for folks who have kids in schools that really are front and center, and you can extend it to city council or mayor, village council, township trustees, right? They're gonna be the ones making decisions on local services, how garbage gets picked up, how streets get plowed, right? And when you want those things to happen, those are the folks you go to, and those are the folks you are going to interact with most about things that are really impacting daily life more often than not.
And as you're watching, as you're listening, and Dave goes down that list, a lot of those issues did hit close to home in our community in the past several months and over the last 4 years during this election. So it does very much play out in Greater West Bloomfield and surrounding areas. Dave, before we let you go, you're the director of the Center for Civic Engagement. A lot of work's been done leading up to this election to try to maybe prevent more of that gasoline from being thrown onto the fire in the rhetoric that's out in this election. But we know it doesn't finish. We learned from 2020 that it doesn't finish once the results are in and the election cycle is over. So what maybe is on the docket going forward at the Center for Civic Engagement that can help people kind of put this election into context, put it in the rearview mirror, and maybe hopefully soften that rhetoric that we've had across our communities in Oakland County and beyond going forward?
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. A week from today at 12:30 on campus, we're going to have an election debrief where a colleague of mine and I are going to go through the results and try to explain those results, what happened and why. And I think it'll be really fascinating. We'll be able to dig into the data and the exit polls, the returns, and really give folks a sense of whoever wins, how they were able to pull it off.
More information can be found on Oakland University's website, and you can also find more by following the Center for Civic Engagement on their Facebook page as well at OUCCE. Dave, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.